So she's already spoke to them and confirmed, oh yeah, we were here.
Oh yeah, we were there. Yeah, you heard that right. One of Foolio's alleged killers just admitted to being at the scene. A jail call between the suspects in Foolio's murder has just leaked, and what's in it is chilling. From casually discussing the murder to hinting at who might have paid them, the tape reveals far more than anyone expected. I've got all the details. Let's get into it in the call. There's laughter after the killing. We got him one. Of the voices, says calm and almost smug, like they just won a game, not ended a life. The call is under 2 minutes long, but every second drips with eerie confidence, the kind that feels calculated, not chaotic, the kind that makes your skin crawl. But to understand the full impact, let's back up. Giulio Foolio was gunned down in Tampa, Florida on June 23, 2024. During what was supposed to be his birthday celebration, that night he'd been posting on social media, inviting fans to pull up to a pool party. What he didn't know was that he wasn't just being followed by fans, but by enemies. According to law enforcement, the suspects tracked Foolio's movements through the city using both his social media posts and direct surveillance. They waited until nearly 4:30 a.m. to make their move. Right outside a Holiday Inn, Foolio was struck by bullets from multiple firearms. 3 others were injured but survived. Authorities later identified the shooters as Sean Gaywright, Richard Murphy, and Davian Murphy. 2 other suspects, Isaiah Chance and Elisa Andrews, were accused of helping plan the attack. But what really connected the group wasn't just street ties. It was their apparent obsession with turning a murder into a spectacle. According to prosecutors, the level of coordination among the suspects was unprecedented. They all had one purpose in coming to Tampa, the state attorney said, and that was to kill. Now, thanks to the leaked jailhouse call recorded just days after their arrests, we know how they felt once the job was done. The audio, first sent to local media before being leaked online, captures the suspects laughing about the aftermath and referencing viral news coverage. One even brags, they ain't even see it coming. Another calls Foolio by name and coldly declares him done for. Let that sink in. A man was gunned down in a public space, and now, behind bars, his alleged killers are laughing about it.
No, this works hard to get shot on. Man, they shot his foot off last year, give him that pirate nub. Man, that post still got his foot shot off, ain't supposed to be bouncing around on his birthday.
This wasn't just a murder, it was a culture of mockery. The killers didn't simply eliminate Foolio, they mocked the very idea that he ever thought he was safe. What truly struck investigators, though, was the tone of the jail call. There was no fear, no desperation, not even a trace of regret. In fact, the mood was disturbingly celebratory. One detective who reviewed the audio said it reminded him of locker room talk. Only, in this case, the game was murder. Police already suspected gang involvement. At a press conference, the Hillsborough State Attorney's Office confirmed that the suspects were either members of or affiliated with ATK and 1200, known rival groups of Foolio's 6-block gang. The investigation uncovered hours of surveillance footage, cell phone records, and even license plate tracking data, all proving that the suspects had followed Foolio from venue to venue that night. It was an elaborate setup, meticulously planned, and it ended in tragedy.
3 shooters exit a vehicle and walked in the direction of the hotel. They murdered Jones with a handgun and 2 rifles. This barrage of gunfire also struck 3 additional victims.
If that all sounds like military-level precision, you're not wrong. But despite the careful coordination, what followed was pure sloppiness. The suspects didn't do much to cover their tracks. Cell tower pings, automatic license plate readers, and eyewitness accounts quickly helped police connect the dots. It didn't take long for the arrests to begin. That's when everything shifted, from stealth mode to full-on showtime. One of the most damning pieces of evidence, surveillance footage. It shows 3 shooters moving in formation, flanking the hotel entrance and opening fire from multiple angles. One suspect is even seen checking for movement before reloading. It's the kind of footage usually reserved for courtroom exhibits, but now it's online for the world to see. And in that footage, they're clearly shooting at Charles.
And they are shooting at Charles now, and you can see that he's the passenger in that car that's moving and trying to flee. And again, they're still shooting at him.
They were still shooting at him. So why did this case blow up online? Because the public isn't just seeing the crime, they're hearing the aftermath. The leaked jail call is doing more than rattling nerves. It's confirming what many feared, that some of these killings aren't driven by desperation, but by a thirst for notoriety, fame, clout, attention. Even Foolio's critics are disturbed, because if this is how the accused react after a high-profile murder, what message does it send to the next generation watching? For Foolio's mother, who showed up at the press conference just hours after learning about the arrests, this isn't just about her son, it's about accountability.
His fans knew him as Julio Foolio, but to his mom, he's Charles. We're fighting to make sure that she gets justice.
And the question remains, how many more young black men will be memorialized in hashtags before something actually changes? And if you thought that phone call was chilling, wait until you hear what one of the suspects did right before the shooting and how it could blow this case wide open. The setup, the betrayal, the hidden bugs, and a second jail call for most people. Betrayal comes quietly, but for Foolio, it may have started with a text message and ended in bullets. I've already exposed how 5 suspects tracked and murdered rapper Julio Foolio during his birthday weekend. We broke down the disturbing jailhouse call that surfaced. Days later, callous, arrogant, and bone-chilling in its casual celebration of death. But what if I told you that may not have been the first time Foolio's name came up in a jail call? And what if someone close to him, someone he trusted, helped set the whole thing in motion? Because the next layer of this story isn't about what happened after the murder. It's about the clues that were already there before the trigger was ever pulled. Let's rewind. 48 hours before Foolio's death, he had just arrived in Tampa, promoting his birthday bash on Instagram stories and other platforms, inviting fans to pull up flashing bottles, sharing party details, and revealing his location in real time.
It got to this bit. Tampa, Florida, man. Pool party push up at 5:36.
What Foolio likely didn't realize was just how many people were watching not to party, but to plot. Investigators believe his constant location updates acted like a breadcrumb trail, making it almost too easy for enemies to follow him. But here's where things get even darker. Authorities are now investigating the possibility that someone from inside Foolio's own circle shared his location not accidentally, but intentionally. According to official police statements, surveillance footage revealed that the suspects' vehicles were already trailing Foolio from earlier venues, not just at the Holiday Inn. That raises a disturbing question. How did they know his full itinerary? Even more alarming, Foolio's own mother told state prosecutors in a closed-door briefing that her son was trying to lay low. That directly conflicts with his public posts, where he was flashing bottles and inviting fans to a pool party. Friends also claimed he was planning to switch hotels that night, but the shooters got their first dot. So either they were watching his every move or someone was feeding them inside information, and here's where the plot takes a hard turn to independent. Sources familiar with the investigation say there was a second jail call, one that hasn't been made public yet. Allegedly, this call had a very different tone, less cocky, more coded, and nervous. Law enforcement hasn't confirmed whether this second call includes a confession. But we do know that during the call, one suspect began asking questions like, "How much do they really got on us though? Who talking?" Questions like that, when paired with surveillance footage, cell tower triangulation, and gang affiliations, paint a picture of suspects who knew exactly what they were doing. And now, fear the consequences. And here's the kicker. Foolio had enemies, public ones. But he also had friends, some of whom, according to investigators, flipped. One of the most damning allegations currently under review is that an associate, someone who had recently fallen out with Foolio, was quietly working with his rivals ATK and 1200. The same groups law enforcement believes orchestrated the hit. The informant's name hasn't been released, but the timeline of their communication lines up suspiciously well with the leaked location data and texts exchanged among the defendants. Was Foolio set up by someone he once trusted? Multiple sources say yes. If that's true, it means this wasn't just a revenge hit, it was a calculated betrayal. According to a former detective-turned-gang expert, this level of coordination is rare outside of cartel activity. What stands Outmost, he said, is the blending of street tactics with digital exploitation. Instagram stories, live location sharing, even facial recognition cameras near the Holiday Inn. They played chess. One retired officer noted, the streets used to be about muscle. This was surveillance tech and surgical planning. They stalked him like a target. That's why the second jail, called the one law enforcement, is still reviewing matters so much. It could reveal who they thought was safe to talk to and who might already be flipping. But even with what seems like airtight digital evidence, prosecutors could still face hurdles. Because several suspects, including Elisa Andrews, are reportedly considering plea deals, but only if they're granted reduced charges. Andrews' attorney has already stated publicly that she's not waiving her right to a speedy trial. Likely means she's trying to use that as leverage to cut a deal quickly. And you better believe that deal could come. With names of who leaked, Foolio's location, names of who bought the weapons, names of who's next on the list. Because this wasn't a one-off, this was part of a chain reaction. At a press conference just days after the murder, Jacksonville Sheriff T.K. Waters didn't mince words. The bigger question remains, if these calls were being monitored, why weren't the suspects stopped sooner? And what is law enforcement doing now to prevent the next high-profile hit? Behind bars, they've reportedly been separated not just for safety, but out of fear they could coordinate another attack or worse, out inside the facility where the suspects are being held. The men charged in Foolio's death have not only been placed on protective watch, they've also been separated from each other and the general population to prevent violence or witness intimidation. And those fears aren't unfounded. There's growing concern that one of the suspects, possibly Elisa Andrews or Isaiah Chance May, have already started talking. While officials have yet to confirm who flipped, multiple legal sources familiar with Hillsborough suspect could be cooperating with prosecutors in exchange for immunity or reduced charges. If that's true, the first jail call we've already heard might just be the beginning. The second, still unreleased, could be something very different. Coded warning. One chilling line allegedly stood out. Tell Shorty not to make this bigger than it gotta be. Vague, cryptic, but undeniably threatening. This brings us to another layer: psychological manipulation. These suspects aren't just alleged gang members, they're also, reportedly, skilled manipulators. Sources inside the jail system claim. Sean Githright, one of the alleged shooters, has a documented history of using coercive tactics to control younger associates' methods, including gaslighting, emotional leverage, and promises of financial support for their families. He runs it like a mob, one insider said. Even from inside, he's got dudes scared of him. That psychological grip may explain why at least one co-defendant, Andrews, hesitated to cooperate, even if it meant taking a murder charge. Because in these crews, loyalty isn't about friendship, it's about leverage. And the unspoken rule, if you snitch, your family becomes a target. But prosecutors are now flipping that strategy, using leverage of their own, offering plea deals. To rewrite the narrative, here's where things get more complicated. Investigators are reportedly trying to determine whether Foolio knew he was being set up. Some believe his last cryptic posts videos of him looking over his shoulder, maybe even that he had been tipped off. In one of the final posts before his death, Foolio said, "If you ain't got the addy, you're not meant to be there." On the surface, just a party flex. But according to a Jacksonville journalist who has covered gang violence for years, that line may have been a coded message. He knew he was being hunted, she said. He just didn't know when they'd strike. And speaking of striking, when U.S. Marshals arrested Davian and Richard Murphy, streets locked down, high-risk protocols in place. Why the intensity? Because these suspects weren't just accused shooters, they were believed to have access to hidden weapons, burner phones, support networks, and perhaps most disturbingly, there were real fears of retaliation hits, according to an unsealed affidavit. Investigators worried that Foolio's murder might not be an isolated incident, but part of a larger gang war. Even law enforcement is bracing for what could come next. In a rare move, both the Tampa Police Department and the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office have ramped up surveillance at known gang hangouts, enlisted social media analysts to monitor threats, and even contacted the families of potential targets. Why? Because in the gang world, loyalty is transactional. If someone inside the operation flips it, doesn't just make them a target, it makes their entire lineage fair game for vengeance. And if Foolio's crew believes someone flipped in this, war is far from over. This isn't over. It's just the beginning. That's why every new leak matters. Every jail call, every legal motion, every confiscated phone from inside that facility, because somewhere in those digital trails lies the truth, who pulled the strings and who got played. Now, a shocking twist changes everything. We begin with an arrest no one saw coming. A surprise defendant steps into the courtroom. A sixth arrest end. Foolio's final secret. Everyone thought it ended with five suspects, 5 murder charges, 5 people accused of orchestrating the calculated ambush of Jacksonville. Rapper Julio Foolio, during what was supposed to be the highlight of his year, his birthday weekend in Tampa. There was a sixth man. He wasn't in the SUV. He didn't pull the trigger. He wasn't even in the city when the shots were fired. But according to investigators, he may have pulled the strings. He wasn't a known shooter, a former business manager, once part of Foolio's inner circle, a man with access to schedules, hotel bookings, calendars, and most importantly, Foolio's trust. This individual allegedly remained close to Foolio after a quiet fallout. But behind the scenes, law enforcement now believes he was funneling real-time intel to rival gang affiliates tied to a TK and 1200 dot. In a stunning turn, digital forensics recovered WhatsApp messages from a burner phone used by suspect Elisa Andrews. One conversation stood out. "Let the streets take care of it." But prosecutors say the pattern, timing, and coordination point to one Menand when they brought him. And for questioning, he folded. According to sealed grand jury testimony, that Foolio had grown paranoid, controlling, a 5-figure payoff purportedly laundered through small Cash App transfers and third-party digital wallets. In return, he handed over enough details for the shooters to predict Foolio's every move, including last minute, confirmation of Foolio's Holiday Inn switch, a decision that police believe ultimately sealed his fate. But here's where the pain cuts deeper. Foolio's Fanzotti, reeling from his murder, had no idea that someone who once stood behind him on stage, flashing peace signs, holding iced-out chains, and smiling in interviews, was part of the setup. The betrayal stung more than the bullets. On Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok tributes poured in alongside speculation, anger, and heartbreak. "Y'all snaked the realest one out the city," one fan posted on Foolio. "Always said the ops wouldn't take him. He never expected his own team." Rapper tweeted, "We ain't never rock with Burbut that set up SHT. Nah, that's coward work." Asterisk, but perhaps the most polarizing voice came from cultural critic Charleston White. Charleston posted a reaction video that went viral. Some praised his honesty. Others accused him of dancing on the man's grave. What made the video unforgettable was this line: "They were born into war, raised in war, and y'all watched it like a movie." The post garnered over 5 million views in 24 hours. And for many, it forced a hard pause, because as much as Foolio embraced his 6-block persona, the tattoos, the disses, the feuds, he was still a 26-year-old man, son, whose mother had to fly across the state to identify his body in what should have been a celebration. The mourning wasn't limited to posts and hashed crossed across Jacksonville and Tampa. Murals of Foolio began appearing spray-painted tributes, showing his face, his lyrics, and signature hand signs at one of the most emotional gatherings. A group of high schoolers held a vigil in Jacksonville, lighting candles and rapping his breakout song, Crooks. One teen told local news, "He made us feel seen." Like if you made it out a 6-block, you could make it anywhere. But grief bred tension. Tampa police were forced to increase patrols. Around the Holiday Inn, after someone defaced the building with graffiti, "We know who did it. This ain't over." And voice memos. One of those recordings, verified by forensic analysts, was dated just 11 days before his death. In it, he says, "It's like I'm paranoid of everybody, and the ones that call me family." He ends the memo with,